So thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about what do we value. I've spent 15 of the last 18 years in Washington, D.C., and I can tell you I think the greatest need we have right now is to clarify our values. And so I grew up born to a nature educator mother and a social justice fighting father. That wasn't his day job, but that is who he is. He's about justice. So I grew up loving nature and wanting to fight for it. So when I was 8 months old, I was in a Jerry pack, and I was on the Sierra Club trips, and I was hiking and learning from my mother about nature and about the amazing salmon and how they came back from the ocean and how they found the stream where they were born, and that's where they died and where they brought life back. I learned about the spiders, and I looked at their amazing webs, and I learned about the black widow and how cool it was that she killed the male when she was done with him. Not my practice. And I loved eating miner's lettuce off of the trails and sucking the honeysuckle stems. I just loved nature. I thought it was amazing. And I collected rocks. We'd go on these long Sierra Club trips and days, and I'd barely be able to get home because my backpack was so full of these rocks, the rose quartz and the white quartz and the mica, because it was so shiny, and the chert and everything. And so my father would lure me with lifesavers and try to talk me to leaving some of the rocks behind, but lifesavers helped me, and I think I can, so I'd get home. And other people grew up with pet fish, but we had dogs and cats, but we also had tarantula in a terrarium. We had a black widow spider on the jar and the counter. We had skulls in closets, and we had dead birds in the freezer. So you never knew what you were going to come across, thanks to my mom's nature classes. My sister was so embarrassed of my mother and her muddy hiking boots that she would make her walk 5 yards ahead of her. We visited oceans when I was little, and I fell in love with the Caribbean Ocean in Yucatan. We've been going there since I was 9 years old. And I loved the Mayan culture, and we went to the ceremonies and the ruins. And so when I got to college, I majored in Latin American studies and anthropology, and I started to learn about the interconnections of environment and development and human rights, and all of these bad development decisions that we were making that were leading to all of this environmental destruction. And I didn't understand how they couldn't be reconciled. So I went and did some human rights work on the ground in Guatemala to try to protect people directly where the impact was happening, but then I thought I really needed to try to go to Washington and change the system. So I learned quickly about Washington. It's the business case, it's the economics case, it's the politics. And so I got so excited when I got to the Department of Energy as my first real job, and here was clean energy. It was good for business, it was good for environment, it was win-win. So I worked on carbon markets to try to make a more level playing field for clean energy. I got a law degree to try to use my law degree and work with business on business strategies to help them make the business case for their investments that were friendly to environment and for business. And over the last couple years, I've been working to help bring clean tech leaders and business leaders to Washington to educate Washington and push for new policies. But after all of that, 15 of the last 18 years, I've really decided it's just not enough, that we have to change what we value. So let's talk about what we value. Right now, our system values money right now. Deutsche Bank says 1% of investment, just 1%, is invested to care about climate change. This is even though investing money now to mitigate climate change will cost us maybe 1 or 2% of our GDP, but it's an investment. And the impacts of climate change, if we don't make that investment, will cost 20% of our GDP. We value dirty energy over clean, fossil fuel subsidies 10 times the subsidies for clean energy subsidies. We value fish out of the ocean more than fish in the ocean, with $20 billion a year going to subsidize the global fishing industry. So that's worth about a quarter of the money we take in from the fishing market is $20 billion in subsidies. So what has that led to? I think we know this. You don't have to read this slide. You can't read this slide, but nature's basically in trouble. The Millennium Ecosystem Assessment was conducted and came out 5 years ago, and it said, with 1,300 of the world's scientists all over the world, they said 2/3 of the world's ecosystems are degraded, 40% of our rivers have been fragmented, 40% of fish species are threatened with extinction. We know all of this. We are at peak everything bad. So those lines, which you can't read, are population growth, species extinctions, water consumption, greenhouse gas emissions, oil consumption. But does it matter? So you don't have to read this one either. But basically, what it says is ecosystems are the foundation for our well-being. They're everything that we rely on. Forests filter and store water. Mangroves and wetlands protect us from storm impacts. Reefs support tourism and fisheries. Plants are medicine. Soils feed us. Plants hold and nourish the soil. Our global economy is suffering a loss, and this is according to Deutsche Bank, of $2 trillion a year from deforestation alone, so just our loss of forests. And we're at what we're calling peak soil. The world's topsoil could be exhausted within 50 years due to erosion and over-farming, combined with climate, water shortages, and population growth. So what happens when we don't have soil? Well, and when watersheds don't work and when forests don't filter water, we see it. Government steps in. Government brings human-engineered solutions. So we build levees, we build water filtration systems, and yet we're just not that good at it. Nature, when New York City was deciding, a lot of you have probably heard about this, but when New York City was deciding about how they could bring more clean water to New York City, they were looking at a $7 to $8 billion investment in a water treatment facility, or $1 billion to pay farmers to restore the watershed that brought the clean water. Nature just fundamentally is a better investment and does it better, but we're not investing in her. We haven't aligned our economic system to value nature, and that's the first thing we have to do, but I still think that's not enough. We have to do it, but it's not enough. I think we have to connect to our accountability. For me, I was doing, and fighting and working within the system and making the economic case. But then I went to an event and I learned about the treatment of animals in the process of producing our food. And for me, that was a wake-up call because I was working the system, but I wasn't living it. I wasn't connecting. The whole reason I'd gone to Washington and fight within the system was to protect these creatures, and here everything I was doing 3 times a day or more than that, eating, was creating this harm and this destruction. So that was what it was for me. But I think it's just about a reconnection for each of us to what matters to us and what are we willing to do in our lives. A contractor who was doing cleanup for the BP oil spill said, "It's important to me that people know the truth about what's going on here." The contractor said, "The things I've seen, they just aren't right. All the life out here is just full of oil. When you see some of the things I've seen, it would make you sick. No living creature should endure that kind of suffering." And I think we just need to see the cost of our system, but I think we also need to see what's possible. So what gives me hope? Well, nature is amazing. We've heard a lot of that today. She's still here. We can restore her. She will bounce back. We've seen it happen. She also has answers. She has solutions now. There's this amazing tree I just heard about last week. It's this big conference on agriculture and climate change and food security. And Africans have been using this tree, Acacia albida, for hundreds of years. They plant it with their crops, and it increases the productivity of their crops 2 to 3 times. This is without any artificial inputs, fertilizers, pesticides. Increases them 2 to 3 times and sequesters carbon up to 10 times more than without these trees. Nature. We heard about Eben Byer's mushrooms on TED. There's a great TED talk that Eben Byer has done where the mushrooms are they're binding plant waste. So any kind of plant waste to create a replacement for styrofoam. Paul Stamets, I'm sure a lot of you have seen his talks about how mushrooms can clean up some of our worst pollution much more cost effectively than chemicals and much more quickly. And then plants grow on those oyster mushrooms and you can actually eat them. And today we have Patrick showing us the solution for plastics. So nature has answers. Also that we can do this. I have been working with these clean tech companies, and during World War II, we retooled our economy in 4 years to produce the priority that we were focused on then, which is weapons. We can do this. We've done it before. And last year, the single largest source of energy that came online in the United States was wind power. We have enough new geothermal technologies can replace all of our baseload coal for our power in the western United States. We can do this. Denmark has a plan to get off of fossil fuels by 2050. Costa Rica is going carbon neutral by 2021. Google has a plan called Clean Energy 2030 that they've put out, very transparent, the assumptions in there. And they've shown us how we can reduce our fossil-based electricity consumption by 88%, vehicle oil consumption by nearly half, CO2 emissions nearly by half, at a net savings of over $800 billion in the life of that plan through 2030. And there are thousands of scientists, inventors, engineers I've seen in the last 20 years I've been working on this. How many people are there putting their minds and their investments to work on this? And I hope they'll get rich from their success. Finally, we can evolve. As a lawyer, we need to evolve our laws to reflect our values. And we're always looking back at precedent, but I think it's time to recognize the challenges we have now, ban the poisons, and give rights to the creatures that we share this planet with. Darwin said, it's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the most responsive to change. And we are good. There was a study that was done that the New Scientist just reported on about babies in 3 months and 6 months. And they had these puppets. And they had a puppet person that was being mean to other people, and they had a puppet person that was being helpful and helping someone up a hill. And when the babies were offered which puppet they wanted, they went for the good puppet. Babies, we're born good. We are good. So finally, what gives me hope? We care. In 2004, I ran an environmental political campaign, and our pollsters were shocked. This was at a moment when the environment was nowhere on anyone's agenda. It was not a priority. We were talking terrorism, Iraq, prescription drugs. But when they tested how they felt about the environment, it was a gut issue. It was the number one way to distinguish the presidential candidates on their values, on what they stood for. So finally, I'm going to end with, this is from today. This is an ad that's running right now, and I want to play it for you. It's supposed to be automatic. What surprises me the most about this ad is it's done by mainstream marketers, and it's airing. I shouldn't tell you this till you see it. It's not working.
The 100% electric Nissan Leaf. Innovation for the planet. Innovation for all.
You kind of want to cry. And it's airing on Thursday Night Football, and it's working. It's going crazy for this company that's selling electric cars. So to me, that gives me hope that a mainstream marketing company is airing that ads, and it's working. And after 15 years in Washington and the cynicism that you can get, and after this election, I know we can reconnect and that we care. So thank you very much.